Hey guys, Justin here with JHart Modelworks. It has been another week, and you know what that means. It is time for another update on the Meng 1/24th scale GT40 buddy build that I'm doing with Chris from CD Scale Models. There's been a lot done. And a lot of times I say, it doesn't look like there's much done, but there really is. No, there's a lot done. We've got a lot of stuff to go over, a lot of cool things I want to show you. So let's go ahead and get this switched around and get to it. Alright, where do we even want to start? Let's start at the front. That's pretty much where we left off last time, I think. So, the front end is completely finished. We have added in a washer fluid reservoir that is not in the kit. And something else that is not in the kit is this big tank. I mentioned previously, I believe the oil system is a dry sump system. There's a scavenge pump at the engine that pulls the oil from the engine to this tank and back. And somewhere in that process it goes into these oil coolers. Meng puts this part in the 1/12th scale kit. They do not put it in the 1/24th scale kit. So I have 3D modeled my own oil reservoir. There's a little window in there. The original plan was to do this window with sheet acetate and paint it to look like there's oil, but it's just too small and it's too dark and you can't see that anyhow. But the way this is 3D modeled is it's absolutely hollow. And this is a separate piece. The window is a separate piece, so you could build your window and then glue that into place. And it's hollow from here back, so you could actually take that cap off if it wasn't glued down and pour oil into it. I need help. I added in some 2mm or 1/16 inch black ribbon and just used some of the little retainer, the little adjuster things from some photo etch seatbelt sets. These are the model car garage seatbelt pieces. So these are ones that I don't typically use when I'm building cars. So I have a bunch of these left over, and so I just grabbed a couple and stuck those in there. And then we got our fittings and some Protect braided line that runs out and should run back to here, or where they should come out and go to these oil breathers. So that takes care of that. I may add this file to my Colts 3D site and make it available for sale because, like I said, Meng puts it in the 1/12th scale kit and it is a part of the Mark II race cars. So it should have been in the 1/24th scale in my opinion. And I think that adds a lot of really nice detail to the front end. We're going to move back here where the big note is the engine is in place. And we did get the valve covers taken care of. So what I did was I used the intake manifold with the valve covers and everything in place and got the heads lined up and glued in. I then came back and using a razor saw, I cut the kit's valve covers off. You can see in there where I hacked the crap out of them, but I did get them off, and I got them off fairly clean. So these are some 3D printed valve covers. I designed these. So back when I did the Mopar Performance valve covers, somebody reached out to me and was like, hey Justin, those are really cool. Can you do the Ford Racing valve covers? I've got a Mustang that I'm doing. And I said, sure. And I was looking at them and I was like, these would look so cool on this kit. So I went ahead and did up a set and got them scaled in properly and got those glued into place. I played with the idea of doing them in blue, and they looked beautiful in blue. They really did. I had black air cleaner, the blue valve covers, the bright silver, absolutely stunning. But the blue and this green, I mean, it looked okay, but it was very abrupt. And I had also originally planned, the original plan was to do them in this green. And I thought, well, maybe it's too much green and this, that, and the other. But I finally accepted that, no, it's not too much green. And these looked better with the body than the blue, in my opinion. We have also added a Holley Dominator carburetor. This is not the kit's carburetor. I'm not a fan of the kit part. The kit carburetor is really small and it's inside this tub, and like the tub's the size of this entire carburetor, and it looked kind of dinky on this 427 engine. So I threw on a Holley Dominator carburetor. I have also added in a fuel rail on this side, and I have it drilled on this side. We're going to run a fuel line out. So this part right here is supposed to be the throttle body, and that's supposed to be the return spring. It's not the best. It's reflecting because there's a lot of silver, and that green is just a bright reflective green. The way I get this anodized green color, so if you take a candy paint, you put on your bright silver base coat, and then you spray the candy, but you don't spray a gloss clear, you get this anodized metal look. And I will sometimes go as far as to add a coat of flat clear to it as well, especially after I do the raised lettering, because it's Vallejo silver and it rubs off really easily. So I'll just throw a flat coat of Mr. Hobby GX113, just their flat UV cut clear over it, just to lock that in so it doesn't rub off. So as I said, we do have our oil coolers in place. And I was just meant to be dry fitting these. I didn't mean for these to be glued in, and I just spaced and started gluing stuff together. We've got some ProTech braided line and some ProTech fittings on there. These just kind of run down to that plate. And then after I had those glued in, because I had the engine out, I was going to be able to show you all the detail of the engine. And I realized that I needed to get the engine in place, so I just went ahead and finished assembling. All right, so another thing we've done is we have cut off the kit's molded in radiator hoses, and I cut it off right at this fitting here. And there's another one down here. I cut it off at that fitting down there. And I just added some ProTech braided line for that as well. That goes down, and these pretty much follow the exact path of the kit parts. So it's not like I stubbed them in the wrong place. That's where they were going to end up if you had just used the kit parts. So the rear sway bar and these frame support bars here, these are LP48 sparkling silver. And then I masked them off and I sprayed Tamiya's clear yellow over them, and that gives this really cool anodized yellowy gold look. I loved it. I'd originally only done these support bars and I liked it so much that I just said to heck with it and did the sway bar as well. Of course, the transmission's in place. That went in place with the engine. It is very important when you get this in that you get the engine to seat properly. It needs to go all the way down and it needs to sit flat. There's a tiny little lip in here, and there's a little extrusion that goes a little bit past it, so this needs to sit flat and flush right on there. And then there's a little nub in here, a locating point, and you need to glue this down and make sure this gets all the way down, because if it doesn't, it can interfere with all of this complicated suspension and frame geometry, and it doesn't sit right. You know, if it doesn't sit right, you're going to have fit issues. People complain about fit issues with this kit, and the more I work on this kit, the more I realize the fit issues aren't fit issues with the kit. It's the way the kit's being built. My advice, do not use CA glue unless you absolutely have to. If you're gluing on 3D printed parts, of course you have to use CA glue. But if you're just doing kit parts, use Tamiya Extra Thin. Because the CA glue is going to add space between the parts, and that space can throw things off. These little joys here, these are brake ducts. They come up here. The brake ducts line up with these parts up here, and they sit flush. If you have these out of whack, or you have the lower parts too high up, they're going to hit and it's going to cause fit issues. Everything has to fit just right. Speaking of the rear end, we have most of the rear body shell done. In fact, the original plan was going to be to cut this just completely off, the entire flat panel. And I decided not to. I went ahead and took the little circle that was in there because I'm not using a circle air cleaner. I took that circle and I turned it into an oval and stretched it down a little bit. The photo etch grill helps a little with this, with supporting this. This is very flimsy. That whole lower section down there is very flimsy, plastic and all, and it hits the bottom of the transmission. Now, once these are in place, it doesn't hit it. But while I was test fitting before I got this part in place, I was constantly hitting out on this and I was constantly seeing it bow. But the grill helps, so get your grill in as soon as you can. We have our bolts, or our rivets, 1.2 millimeter ProTech rivets in place where all of those bolts would be to hold that rear spoiler in place. I love how the taillights turned out. So these are clear. I sprayed the inside with Tamiya Clear Red. I then sprayed some bright silver, I think it was sparkling silver, or it may have been duraluminum. It may have been Mr. Hobby Super Metallic Duraluminum. I sprayed after I sprayed the Clear Red. And then I sprayed some black, some just Mr. Surfacer black over that, all from the back. And that gives us a nice, rich, deep red on these taillights. So once you get all this frame stuff in place, this becomes a little tricky to get in. This will probably be the last time it is off. So we do have our plugs wired up. We are using a 3D printed distributor. We're not using the kits distributor. I found that I could use a 3D printed distributor and get it shorter. The kits distributor sits just a little higher. And with a part that we're not going to be using that does come in the kit, the distributor sits right up under it and it causes a conflict. So doing it this way, we're able to get our plug wires in, and we do have them wired up in the correct firing order, which is something that I do when I'm doing like a 3D printed distributor. If I have a distributor where there's holes that are easily, identifiable, I'll go ahead and look up the firing order. It doesn't take that long to do, and it's not that hard. If I'm using a kit distributor, I'm lucky if I get all 8 plug wires in and just say screw it and just run them. Mix it up, make it look good, because no one's going to really know. But we do have the plug wires run all the way through here. Now, when I originally drilled these, I drilled them wrong. The plug holes should go to the inside of each of the exhaust ports, and I just right down the center, but that's okay because we got them drilled correctly and we got all of our plug wires run correct, and we have our ignition coil on. I don't know where that's going to go. It's probably going to go on the back wall somewhere, but for right now it's just flopping around in the breeze. One other thing is I added some ProTech oil breathers. The way these are designed, there's a hole in them for an oil breather or a fill cap. And since your oil fill cap is actually up here, I just did dual oil breathers in here. Now, the air cleaner is not on yet. Like I said, I still have to finish running the fuel lines, and I don't want to put the air cleaner on because it will basically cover this up and make it real hard to get to. But here is our air cleaner. So that should sit right like that. And then the cover just clears it with no problem. So I 3D modeled and printed this up as well, and the lettering and the details are raised just a little bit more than they should be, because I've found these online. On Cults 3D, there's 3 or 4 different versions of this air cleaner, but they all have like real shallow detail, and which makes them real hard to paint up. So just raising it just a little, not enough that it's really obtrusive, but definitely enough that you can get some detail in there. Now the way I do this is a cool tip I picked up from Zippi over at Zippi's Garage. The way I get these lettering and I get it so clean. So I use an eraser. Put down a couple of pieces of tape, put a drop or 2 of Vallejo silver down. I will stamp until I get the whole flat surface. Rub it around a bit, get it nice and evenly distributed. Tap it off onto a paper towel so that there's no bubbles or anything. So it's just a flat sheet of silver. And then you just sit and you tap against the surface. You don't smash, you just tap. You do it. You may have to go 2 or 3 rounds with it. Just keep, dipping it in, wiping it off, tapping it down. And because it's so large, it covers a large area. Because it's hard, it doesn't go down far enough unless you're just smashing. If your detail is raised enough, it doesn't go down enough to hit that flat surface on the bottom. It just hits that top surface and transfers your paint over. So when you're dry brushing, sometimes the bristles flick in and it, hits paint on your flat surface. You don't get that doing this method. So thanks to Zippi. Go check him out. Zippi's Garage. Cool guy. Some beautiful builds. Gorgeous one-to-one pickup named Ruby. But yeah, that is how we do the lettering and the stripe detail. Then it's going to sit right about like that. It'll be straight when I do it, but it'll sit like that when I glue it in. And the way we've got that panel modified, the panel clears it, and it just works fine. Speaking of the back wall, we do need to finish the glass. I have added the plumbing to the fuel pumps. With all the information given to me from the GT40 forum, our intake comes in from the tanks, goes through here, and then comes out. And this is going to run out to the carburetor. I kind of want to run it up here to a fuel filter. I don't know if I'm going to be able to make that happen or not. We will see. Right into the rear glass, the kit has this shelf piece. It's in the 1/12 scale kit as well, but it's not on any of the real cars. There's little nubs that it's supposed to glue to. I have cut those off and just flattened those out. And then this sits up here, something about like that. It looks nice, I guess. It's not, there is no shelf on any of the real cars. There's no shelf on any of the aftermarket cars, like the Super Performance. Nothing has a shelf back here. And with that shelf in place, you can't wire the distributor because the shelf sits right on top of that distributor. So if you had the kit distributor in place, it's going to sit right up against inside that little raised area. So you couldn't drill any plug wires if you wanted to. So I just cut it off. You can kind of see where I didn't get them perfect, but they're good enough. So I just cut them off. I'm just going to leave it nice and flat, and I'm not going to put that in there. For the rear end, for the most part, we're looking at the exhaust. And I have messed the exhaust up. So the exhaust comes as 4 pieces. This is the famous bundle of snakes. These pieces connect up to your heads. And then this end is supposed to line up with these. We're going to see how well that turns out. But this is 2 separate parts. And you glue them together. And you can still kind of see the seam in there. There did not used to be metal pins. These are the tips. Huge splits, huge seams. They look terrible. These are a lot thinner than they originally are. I have thinned these down a bit and they're still really thick. And you still see those seams. They're not pretty. I was still going to leave them on and just paint them up. But while I was thinning them out, the drill bit snagged and ripped a hole through the side. So I went ahead and cut them off. I've added a little metal 0.5 millimeter metal pin to them. I cut them off right at that little fitting. And this is actually a locating point. So I made sure that locating point stayed intact. Those line up with this little raised section on top of the transmission. So I, of course, have 3D modeled and printed my own exhaust tips. They have the angle, which you can't really see, but they have the correct angle to them on this side. They look perfect. There's no nasty seams in them. They're nice and thin. I, of course, print up spares. So like I said, there's an angle. That angle lines up to the kit part. So they should just glue on just like that. And then hopefully no one will ever know that I jacked up the exhaust. So that's about where we're at with the build so far. Like I said, the back end is about 80% done. We do need to get the exhaust wrapped up. We need to get the rest of the rear suspension taken care of for the wheels and the axles. Get that back wall in place, and then we can start working on the interior. I don't know how much of that we're going to get done this week, but that is the plan on what we're going to focus on. Check out Chris at CD Scale Models. He's doing a buddy build on this with me. I don't know if he's going to get an update anytime soon. I don't know kind of where he's at right now. Well, I do. He's having some problems. Poor guy is struggling. He's had some complications with his air compressor. He had some issues with his airbrush. He's having a hard time with it, but we've talked about his plans. He's got his compressor working right again. He's got his airbrush working good again. And I know he's going to get it turned around and really knock it out of the park because Chris is an amazing builder. So like I said, go ahead and check him out. I'm going to go ahead and get to work on that exhaust. Thank you for hanging out with me. I appreciate you watching the videos. Even when they get long like this, especially when they get long like this. I know this one was long, but there was just a lot of really cool stuff that I wanted to go over and I wanted to share with you because we just got a lot done, and a lot of it I thought was really cool. So again, thanks for watching. I appreciate you greatly, and I'm going to catch you on the next one.